Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner.
In our top story, Israeli leaders are shocked that the West has fallen for Iran's trickery. This comes despite numerous warnings from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that the P5+1 nations, France, China, Russia, the United States, Great Britain, and Germany, were making too many concessions and caving in to the hardline Islamic republic's every demand regarding the disastrous nuclear agreement signed last week. Netanyahu vowed to turn to the U.S. Congress as the last line of defense against the devastating deal, which he calls a mistake of historic proportions. Even as the West capitulated, Tehran continued to insist that it will never comply with any accord signed with the international community. And as the negotiations were winding down, the leader of the Iranian military boasted that no matter what agreement is made, UN monitors will never be allowed to access Iranian nuclear sites. Nevertheless, the Obama administration remained determined to appease the Iranian regime, even as Iran simultaneously called for America's destruction. Erin has more on that story.
Yes, Yochanan, that's right. Just as Iran was receiving even more concessions at the negotiating table, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani led a march of hatred through the streets of Tehran. During the procession, led by Iranian leaders, masses screamed for death to America and death to Israel. The Ayatollahs demanded the destruction of the Great Satan USA and Little Satan Israel, as Iranian citizens burned the flags of both nations in the streets of the Iranian capital. During all Quds Day protests, the Iranian Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, appealed to the country's youth to prepare for the fight against what he called American arrogance. The occasion marked Al-Quds, or Jerusalem Day, which is an international Arab-Muslim holiday endorsed by the Ayatollahs as a religious obligation to demonstrate a pro-Palestinian platform. It's generally observed with violent protests by activists worldwide who demand that Israel's capital be seized from the Jews while shouting slogans calling for the destruction of Israel.
Israeli officials claim that the U.S. completely cut Israel out of the Iranian nuclear negotiations. Israel believes that Iran is racing to create a nuclear weapon to destroy the Jewish state. Prime Minister Netanyahu has been an outspoken critic of the talks, warning that no deal was better than a bad deal. His decision to appeal to Congress several months ago led to the total blackout from the White House on the progress of the negotiations. According to Israeli sources, Jerusalem was completely frozen out of the process while the agreement was being finalized. American officials confirmed that there had been a breakdown in communication with Israel, but said that it was due to scheduling conflicts.
Islamic State forces operating in Iraq and Syria have been cracking down hard on moderate Muslims during observance of the month of Ramadan. The extremist jihadis have reportedly been brutally punishing anyone who doesn't strictly adhere to the fasting during daytime hours. And in Mosul, those caught cheating are caged in the public square for days. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights also states that Ramadan violators have been tied to wooden crosses in public squares, while other sources report that the victims have been publicly flogged for transgressing Islamic Sharia law.
ISIS has claimed responsibility for the bombing of the Italian consulate in Cairo last week. This is the latest in a string of deadly attacks in Egypt as Islamic radicals and the Egyptian military fight for control of the Sinai. An Islamic State spokesman issued a warning to Muslims to stay away from Western sites as they are legitimate targets for future terrorist strikes. One civilian was killed and nearly a dozen wounded in the massive blast, which rocked the capital. This attack came just 2 weeks after the Egyptian state prosecutor was assassinated in an ISIS bombing.
Jerusalem is quietly negotiating the release of 2 Israeli citizens being held in Gaza, both of whom apparently suffer mental instability, who entered the Hamas-held territory voluntarily. One has been identified as 28-year-old Avram Mengistu, who is of Ethiopian descent. The other is a Bedouin. The government is appealing for their release on humanitarian grounds. Mengistu is believed to have crossed the Israeli barrier into Gaza last September, at which time he was detected by security forces who were unable to recover him in time. It is believed that he was then captured by Hamas terrorists and held captive for 9 months. The Bedouin was reportedly detained by Hamas while he was on a visit to Gaza 3 months ago. The Palestinian leaders of the Strip are notorious for torturing and executing anyone whom they believe sympathizes with Israel and accuse of spying on behalf of the Jewish state. Prime Minister Netanyahu spoke out since the news broke of the citizens being held, assuring the nation that the government has been quietly working for the release of the captives and promising that they will be safely returned.
Despite recognizing numerous places in Israel as World Heritage Sites, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, still allowed its annual meeting to be turned into an Israel-bashing forum. Several Arab nations submitted a vehemently anti-Israel resolution accusing the Jewish state of endangering the Temple Mount. It's important to note that the document declares that the Temple Mount is a Muslim-only holy site. It accuses Israel of occupying the old city of Jerusalem and calls the Western Wall a Muslim plaza. The Islamic Waqf, which controls the Temple Mount, restricts Jews and Christians from visiting the holy place. Nevertheless, UNESCO is blaming Israel for the site's endangered status. Israeli officials slammed the resolution, saying that UNESCO is ignoring Jewish and Christian ties to Jerusalem. Dr. Dori Gold, the Director General of Israel's Foreign Ministry, said the resolution is completely one-sided, full of distortions, and is totally disconnected from reality on the ground. He added that it deliberately ignores the historical connection between the Jewish people and their ancient capital, along with Christianity's age-old ties to the holy city. Dr. Gold blasted the UN body, saying the historical sites of this area are being systematically destroyed by jihadist forces, and that UNESCO's adoption of an utterly false allegation about Israeli archaeological practices is misplaced and hypocritical.
Republican presidential candidate Ted Cruz made headlines last week after publicly accusing the Obama administration of hypocrisy over its position on Israel. The Texas senator was speaking out in response to the White House decision to normalize relations with communist Cuba and exchange ambassadors with the oppressive dictatorship in the island nation, saying that for Washington to base an embassy in Havana before Jerusalem is a slap in the face to Israel. He's repeatedly called for the American embassy to be moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, the eternal capital of the Jewish people, and is joined in this appeal by fellow Republican presidential candidate Florida Senator Marco Rubio in calling for the Jerusalem Embassy Act to be implemented immediately, proving that the issue of Jerusalem may be an important factor in the upcoming U.S. election.
Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of the Hezbollah terrorist organization, has called for Muslims and all those who back the Palestinian cause to support Iran. He said Iran's enemies are the enemies of Jerusalem. He also declared that the resistance movements that the Ayatollah sponsors, such as Hezbollah, which operates as Iran's proxy army in Lebanon, are the only hope for the region. Hezbollah, which is funded and trained by Iranian forces, is notorious for placing its operatives throughout the world with the directive to attack Jewish and Western targets. Last month, a Hezbollah member was sentenced to 6 years in prison for stockpiling 8.2 tons of ammonium nitrate, a material used to make explosives. He admitted the chemicals were to be used in an attack against Jewish targets abroad.
Non-Muslims are again being barred from entering the Temple Mount in Jerusalem's Old City, which is the holiest site in Judaism. We've reported extensively on the injustice of Muslim control over the compound, where Jews and Christians are heavily restricted from visiting and completely forbidden from praying by the Muslim Waqf, which controls the site. While Muslims can access the site freely from numerous entrances without restriction, current tensions and increased Islamist terror attacks during the month of Ramadan led to a complete ban on any Jews or Christians from coming to the area during the last 10 days of the Muslim holiday. Both communities are outraged, and demanding that there be a change in the status quo about worship at the holy site.
There is some good news from Jerusalem, where a group of faithful Jews are moving forward with plans for the next Jewish temple. The Temple Institute is involved with raising red cattle in the Holy Land in accordance with the biblical commandment to bring a pure red heifer to the temple priest as part of a purification ceremony. Rabbi Chaim Richman of the Temple Institute said, 3 decades of research and preparation have led us to this special day. The Institute has already created over 70 sacred vessels, including the golden menorah and the high priest gemstone-encrusted breastplate. Rabbi Richman said it is now time to fulfill the commandment of the red heifer. He added that this project is the first stage of the reintroduction of biblical purity into the world, which is a prerequisite for building the third temple.
50 Christians were recently honored for their efforts to save Jews during the Second World War. All were elderly Christians of Polish descent who were commended by the Foundation of the Righteous during a service presided over by the Chief Rabbi of Poland alongside diplomats from the United States and Israel. And in a related story, 30 survivors of the Holocaust just celebrated their bar and bat mitzvahs at the Western Wall in Jerusalem. The participants are all in their 70s who gathered at the holy site to mark the special coming-of-age rite stolen from them by the Nazis. They were also hosted in the Israeli parliament by the Speaker of the Knesset, Yuli Edelstein, who greeted them with blessings and appreciation, saying that even though their youth was stolen, they chose to live by coming to Israel and establishing the next generations. That concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host Josh Reinstein, and we're here on a beautiful sunny day in Jerusalem on our rooftop studio. My guest today is Michelle Rojas Tal, the Diaspora Education Director for Stand With Us. Michelle, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Josh.
Michelle, tell our viewers a little bit about what is Stand With Us.
Stand With Us is an organization that was founded 14 years ago during the height of the Second Intifada. What initially started as a group of community activists who were very concerned with Israel's image on college campus today has developed into 18 offices and chapters across the globe with an entire network of pro-Israel activists that are dedicated to promoting and educating on behalf of Israel and fighting back against the wave of anti-Semitism that we are experiencing across the globe.
You know, some of the things that Stand With Us do is they produce videos, especially about what's happening on university campuses in America. Why is it so important to get that message out?
It's crucial to get the message out there, and I think one of the reasons why we are so dedicated to producing materials that are getting out there through multimedia is because we understand that we're dealing with a generation with a very short attention span. We are facing an onslaught of anti-Israel activity across the globe, and our videos are helping to promote the idea that this generation really understands the challenges that we are facing in terms of Israel's image, especially on college campuses.
Now, we use a lot of these clips on the show, and the thing that astonishes me is that it's blatant anti-Semitism happening in American campuses. If this was any other minority, I think this would be national news, yet it doesn't seem to be picked up with the same amount of intense shock or anything of another type of minority being attacked on campus. Why has this become so mainstream?
I think your point is spot on, Josh, and it's actually the point that I bring to the audiences that I present to. I'm actually half Hispanic myself, and I know that if this type of activity was taking place on university campuses and Hispanic students were finding themselves as the target of this type of vicious activity so often, it would not be tolerated. It should not be tolerated against any minority group, and the fact that there are Jewish students today in 2015 that feel uncomfortable walking onto an American university campus is intolerable. This is not a Jewish issue. This is not a Zionist issue. This is an issue that all Americans and people across the globe, quite frankly, because this is an international phenomenon, need to be concerned with.
Anyway, America is the most pro-Israel country in the world. We have complete staunch support from the Congress, from the leadership, from the government. It doesn't make sense. Why isn't there more of an outrage? Why isn't this illegal, what they're doing on the campuses? Why isn't funding the campuses being cut? Why is this allowed to go on?
Well, I think a lot of it is being presented under the premise of free speech, and even amongst the concept of free speech and what free speech represents, we still have to remember that people's basic rights must be protected. And essentially what we're finding on more and more university campuses is that Jewish students are feeling threatened. Not just Jewish students, but any student that wants to present a pro-Israel voice feels threatened, doesn't feel safe. I know myself as a student, I often felt intimidated to share my opinion on campus. And what we are trying to do at Stand With Us is raise more awareness of this issue and bring together a larger community across the political spectrum to say to our university campuses, this is intolerable. We cannot tolerate such type of behavior on our campuses. And yes, absolutely, especially in a country like the United States, where freedom of speech is valued, where religious freedoms are protected, the right of our Jewish students on campus to feel safe is absolutely crucial, and something that people across the globe really must come behind.
I was in the States in February or March, and there were these frat boys out of Oklahoma singing these horrible anti-African American tunes. It was front page news on every television station. The students were expelled. The head of the school had to make a statement. Why wasn't that protected under free speech? The question is, why is a double standard tolerated in America?
I think part of the problem is that anti-Zionism or anti-Israel sentiment today is disguising itself as old-fashioned anti-Semitism. And really, we all know, and thankfully, a country like the United States does not tolerate blatant anti-Semitism, as it should not. And neither, as the example that you gave, tolerate any type of ignorance against the Black community, the Hispanic community, any minority group in the US. But within that, under this cast of socially acceptable and politically correct anti-Zionism, this is how the conversation is taking place on campuses. And the academic standpoint on it is that, well, it's a free space and people have a right to exchange these ideas. But what they're not realizing is that this is absolutely a ploy in order to really delve into what a lot of these people are promoting is old-fashioned anti-Semitism and hate speech.
If there's this hate speech on campuses and they're calling literally death to the Jews or to wipe out Israel, can't students just call the police and tell them what's going on and people will be arrested, or will it just be ignored?
I think first and foremost, what our students need to do and what we as an organization encourage our students to do is to build coalitions on campus. It's really important to get a lot of groups behind your cause, have them understand Israel's side of the story. And at the end of the day, I think we can do a lot better of a job in telling Israel's side of the story. Israel has a very strong case to be made. And I think if the average American, the average Australian, the average Brit really understood how like-minded the values of Israeli society are and how they're so much in line with their own values in terms of Israel's triumphs and in terms of its challenges as a democracy, people would be able to relate to it in a lot better fashion. And that would help to push back against this very loud, vicious minority group on campuses. And I think also raise the awareness of the administration and have them understand that this cannot be tolerated at their schools.
Michelle, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
The message I have for your audience is one that I really hope brings people together. I'm sure your audience is very familiar with the concept, the very famous quote, "All that is needed for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing." This is a cause that we all need to unite behind. Some people say the situation has never been worse. I feel the situation has never been better. Israel has some of the best, most charismatic, strong supporters across the globe, including our brothers and sisters in the Christian community. We need your voices now. Know what is happening on your local college campuses, in your local media, and look to Stand With Us for support and become a part of our network in helping to make Israel's case to the world.
Michelle, thank you for being on the show, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
Up next, shining light from Israel.
I think the mentality in Israel is really good. The mentality of risk-taking, the mentality of experimentation, the mentality of being able to be creative and being good with saying, okay, I'm going to fail now and I'm going to be successful later on.
unparalleled. If I look globally at the top startup ecosystems, Israel's in the top 3 for sure. The quality of the startups is very high. There is a entrepreneurial culture here that's in the DNA of the people. It's insane. I can't even tell you. I've seen some amazing companies coming through that I believe will be the next billion-dollar companies.
Wix is an online platform that enables users from all around the world to build their online business and a beautiful website around our platform. Currently we have 39 million registered users and we're adding around 1.2 new registered users every month. The uniqueness about the Israeli culture and the Israeli startup spirit is by the way that we would like to share and to learn from each other's success and further.
Are you familiar with the feeling that you wake up in the morning and you see your closet full of clothes but you don't know what to wear? So that's why we created Wishi, which is a crowdsourcing for style. You upload your closet and then people from all around the world, your friends, our community, stylists, people from Japan, can enter your closet and create style for you for your upcoming events.
The reason why we moved our R&D center to Tel Aviv is because, and not in New York, is because in Tel Aviv we have engineers and development teams that are looking for solutions. And when they get a mission, they will find a way how to accomplish it. We have a lot of really smart people. We have a lot of people that want to change the world through technology.
Our mission is to eliminate from this world arguments between parents and kids over practicing a musical instrument. We create a service that makes learning music and music practice into a fun game.
We bring the next generation of video games to the living room. We convert any regular screen into a magic window, allowing you to look into it. We track your head movements, we track your weapon movements. We allow you to shoot very intuitively.
In Israel, a lot of people are excited about working in a startup. As a society, we respect people who work in a startup, although we know they're probably not earning much money. And therefore, people are more willing to take the leap with you. We were ranked recently the second best place after Silicon Valley to open a startup, so there's this great industry. There's a great environment, it's great fun for young and creative people, it's very tolerant and diverse. And bring those two together and say to entrepreneurs all over the world, come live in Tel Aviv and open your startup in Tel Aviv.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
In 1980, the Israeli parliament passed a law declaring a united Jerusalem as the eternal capital of the State of Israel. Threatened by the Arab League with an oil embargo, national embassies in Jerusalem closed their doors. That same year, Christians from around the world gathered in Jerusalem to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. Sensing the isolation of the Israeli people, the participants and leaders of this gathering decided to establish the International Christian Embassy in Jerusalem.
The International Christian Embassy Jerusalem is since more than 30 years right here in Jerusalem to connect the global church with the nation of Israel. For many Jewish people throughout the centuries, the only face of Christianity, what they experienced, was the ugly face of anti-Semitism, of Christians persecuting the Jewish people wherever they found them. As Christian Embassy, we are here in Israel to show a new face of the church, a new face of Jesus Christ to the Jewish people. We are here to affirm to Israel and to the nation that God is a covenant-keeping God, that God is a God who didn't abandon His people, but that He is faithful to every single promise which He has made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
What an amazing thought, that when everyone was abandoning Israel, Christians stepped in and said, we will stand with Israel and we will have an embassy in Jerusalem.
Already for more than 30 years, the International Christian Embassy Jerusalem is reaching out all over the land, from the north to the south, from the east to the west, to reach those people that are in need. And these people are, of course, the Jewish people who live in this land. But we've also been reaching out to the Christian Arab, to the Muslims, to the Bedouin, and to the Druze that are part of the population of Israel.
Our vision is to build relationships, to foster reconciliation, and to reach out with God's love by responding to the social needs that come across our desk every single day. Through the projects that we do, we hope to provide a better future for the people of Israel and to reach out with hope to those who need it most.
With representation in more than 80 countries around the globe, the ICEJ is actively working to be the connection of the Christian Church worldwide to Israel.
To say that we want to reach every country in the world, it's not just a saying, it's a mandate from God that we are to reach into every nation of the world, find those willing to represent their nation and stand with Israel in these days. It's prophetic, it's significant, and it's absolutely world-changing.
Through our publications, TV programs, digital media platforms, and annual events such as the celebration of the Feast of Tabernacles, we are providing resources and opportunity for the church to connect and engage in being an active part of what God is doing today in the nation of Israel.
You know, the truth is, the work of the ICJ is more important now than it's ever been. With Israel at the eye of the Middle East storm, we must stand with Israel. And we must stand with the Jewish people to see God move in our generation right here in the land.
It's so important to educate the church regarding Israel from the Word of God and in the Bible. There's a lot of theory among the Christians speaking about Israel and a lot of opinions, but we do have to go to the Word of God with the revelation of the Holy Spirit actually, so the church can really understand that without the Jewish people and without Israel, there wouldn't be any church, there wouldn't be any Bible, there wouldn't be any salvation.
I want to personally invite you to find out more how you can connect yourself or your church with the nation of Israel. I look forward to hearing from you.
To learn more about how you can connect with what God is doing today in Israel, visit our website at www.icej.org.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all of your Israel updates.